Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday. If you wouldn't mind, just drop a note in the chat. I want to hear what your biggest win is for the week. We will go ahead and get started. Mark, over to you.
This week, we're going to talk about people. It's week 4 of September, even though it's the first here. So this is the last of September's intensive sprints. And we're going to talk through the people component. So as you probably remember, when we kicked off this month, we were really talking about designing the org around the customer and really making sure that as we look at the client journey from day one all the way through to becoming a loyal customer, as we kind of look at that customer journey, we have to craft teams and roles that optimize every single stage of that journey. So today, what we're going to do is kind of talk about how to build a career plan for everybody in the company as they come in so that we can keep them and retain them. And most importantly, really optimize that career, that customer journey at every stage of the way. So as we kind of start to think about it, I always like to reflect, and I think some founders feel like I pick on founders, but obviously I'm always picking on myself when I do that, reflecting on my own shortfalls over the years and, lots that I'm probably still dealing with. The reality is culture scales through people systems. And when there's no systems, it just never scales, because what you end up with is all of the culture really revolving around the founder. And so I kind of like to think about it like this. If I'm this founder and culture is just kind of swirling around me, on good days, maybe it's good, maybe it's green. But on bad days, when I'm either too busy, I'm not present, maybe I'm even away on vacation, or, I've got so many tasks to deal with that I'm just not putting any effort into culture, I think it kind of quickly goes red. And so I kind of feel like you've got this green and red culture where it's good, then it's bad. It's good, then it's bad. And that's only natural because a founder is just another human. And if we're relying on the founder's mood, or the founder's time bandwidth, or the founder's creativity to keep culture live and well every day, that gets really heavy. Now, I can tell you for sure, in all of my businesses, when it feels kind of heavy, I'm awfully thankful for the systems, because there's days where I just want to bury my head in the sand and I don't feel like running around like a cheerleader. There's days where I don't feel like holding people accountable. There's times when I want to go on vacation for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or at some points throughout my career, as much as 6 weeks. And I want to make sure that the culture is the same, or hopefully even better when I get back. Ideally, everybody's happier when I'm not around, not because, that when the cat's away, the mice will play, but because they just breed culture on their own, because there's systems that allow them to make it better without having to rely on me. And chances are they can all make it a lot better than I can. And that's why these systems are so important. The founder just can't scale culture without systems. You can't be everywhere at once. And so you have to build a culture that scales as the business scales. And that's a tricky thing to do without people systems. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, because what happens to most of us when our business starts to scale, all of a sudden weird things start happening. Quality starts to slip, customers start to get upset, people are quitting and didn't even know they were upset and they're quitting. And then you start to kind of realize it's really just a factor of not being around enough. And so people start to think the culture is not good, but really it's just that the owner can't be everywhere at once. And with no systems, people kind of start to make up their own stories. And oftentimes what their perception of the owner is versus what the owner really wants are two different things. And so I almost feel like sometimes the entire company perpetuates bad culture and blames the owner, but really the owner's so overwhelmed, they don't even know where to start. And that's a horrible place to find yourself. I've certainly been there many times. I'm going to share how I think you can avoid that here today. Now, New hires come into the company one after the other in landscape. And when we're pouring new hires into a leaky bucket, and the leaks are pretty simple, there's no career paths. We don't have very strong onboarding. We've got naturally pretty bad culture when everybody's kind of making up the stories. And I think this burnout is kind of running rampant in a lot of businesses when there is no systems. And so you're pouring good people, great people, could be even the best people into a system that's got all of these holes. And so what ends up happening is we just keep pouring talented people in the top and they just keep running out of the bottom. And those holes in your bucket are just these missing systems. And so I'll tell you for sure, as soon as you plug the holes, and that's what we're going to talk about today, you'll notice that all of your problems start to change. I'm not going to say they get like that all your problems go away, but you really start to notice that you have to build more systems as you start to plug a few holes. But you'll notice that your turnover really starts to slow down and that your output really starts to improve across all areas: safety, quality, efficiency, and just about everything that touches our customers. And so when we really kind of think about how to do this, in my experience, there is no easy way to build culture. And you've probably heard me say this before. Culture in the company is the way it is. And the way it is the way you make it. And sometimes, I've had people come up to me and say, "Hey, Mark, I get it now. It's a good definition. Like, culture is just the way it is. But like you always say, culture is the way you make it. Like, how do I change it if it's not so good?" And I'll tell you that the most common people asking this question are not the owners. It's usually the leadership team or the managers in the company. And they say, culture is not so good. And the owner doesn't really know how to fix it, or I think they would, because they're a good guy or a good person, good woman, and good family. That, like, I know they want a good culture and I trust them. That's why I'm still working here, but I don't know how to help them make it better. And almost instantly, I always say the same thing. Do you have a people system? Is it documented? And you'd probably hear me say all the time, "Hey, do you have a sales process?" And oftentimes people think they have one and they don't. And the same holds true with people systems. I'll say, "Do you have systems for people?" And they'll say, "Yeah, I think so." And I'll say, "Well, is there a documented system? Is there a playbook? Are there SOPs to manage and develop and retain and hire and motivate people?" And usually the answer is very quickly no. And so today, what we're going to talk about are developing some SOPs that systemize a culture that scales beyond the founder, so that the founder, who usually wants good culture, can have it systematically and systemically, where everyone in the company is contributing to that culture. And so there's a few, sort of steps that are often missing. And if we think about this little wheel here, you can imagine if any one of these 5 spokes fell off and the wheel started to wobble, or worse yet, one of these chunks kind of came right out of our wheel, we wouldn't have much flow in the business. Things would feel pretty rough and rocky. And I think that's what happens when we think about our hiring systems, just recruiting alone. What do the job ads look like? What do the job descriptions look like? Where are we putting them? Do we have a pay range? Just that recruiting piece alone. Like, if we're still advertising for laborers, then we're going to get people with a fixed mindset coming to work and wanting to work in our organizations. And when they show up, they're going to be really hard to onboard and train and develop because we didn't hire the right people to begin with. And this is why oftentimes I always say it's a hard realization, but when you look around in your company and you have a lot of people with a fixed mindset, particularly if they've made their way into management positions, sometimes there's a cleanup needed, or at least a major shift. And I'll tell you, it's not easy to get people with a fixed mindset who don't believe they deserve more, believe that they can have more, to actually make the jump and start to jump right into training and development and career pathing. Because some people just don't want that, and they don't believe that that's for them. And so ultimately, when we see people who are not going to fit this future culture, we do have to make a few moves. But when you really focus on recruiting properly, then I think your onboarding system, which is the next sort of spoke in the wheel, it needs to be very well documented, a 30, 60, 90-day onboarding plan for every role in the company with a 12-week plan where people know what they should be doing in their first 12 weeks so that they get a fair chance to have a little check-in at 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days to see whether or not they're keeping up with the training, that their attitude and their cultural fit with the organization makes sense. Because ultimately, if we're seeing people being late multiple times, if their grandma's died 3 times in the first 90 days, we've got a problem. And, I always say, if your grandma dies 3 times, you better be adopted. What we see oftentimes over these next few months in that 90-day onboarding tells us just about everything that's going to happen in the future. And so during this onboarding, if we have it structured right, we can determine whether this person's going to go really far or if they should really go out soon. And I think we shouldn't keep people past 90 days who we don't believe can stay with us for 20 years. And I think that in itself is not the way we think about things in this industry. So what happens is we attract the wrong people, then we don't onboard them. They get a bad sort of first experience. The best people leave your company in the first 90 days because they don't see any career path. The worst people stick around. And so if you don't have onboarding, it's not just that you don't onboard people properly, it's actually that the best people quit long before you even see how good they really are, because they're searching for a career, they're not searching for a job. And then we want to find a way of training people to support that onboarding. And really, that's what Greenius is purpose-built to do, is build your career paths, identify what they are, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. And then more importantly, make sure that you've got training and a training pathway assigned to these people. And some of it can be online training in Greenius, and some of it can be on-the-job training, and you can even use Greenius to confirm that you're doing that on-the-job training with field checklists. And then some of it could also be the 360 feedback tool in Greenius, where the employee is giving some feedback every 30, 60, or 90 days throughout onboarding, and the supervisor is giving feedback as well. And this way, there's a real give and take, I think, on feedback from the new employee and the management team to make sure that that person is flowing along. And so again, Greenius is purpose-built for this. If you're not using Greenius for career pathing, there's a huge opportunity there. And then you can layer in your on-the-job training, you can layer in third-party training, apprenticeship programming, whatever you like on top of that. Now, when you think about the next step in the wheel here, when we're really kind of getting around here, we're thinking, once we've done some training and we've gotten them up to speed, we need to grow them. And that's the whole purpose of an apprenticeship, and why I talk so much about apprenticeship is it doesn't happen in 90 days. We need people to be fully ramped and ready to add value in 90 days for sure. But over the course of 3 years, 4 years, even 5 in some trades, we want to train that person to get technical enough in which they can add the value, but also continue to grow into management so that we can leverage all that expertise that they've gained in the field. And more importantly, train other people to the standards that they've been trained to. And so if we don't ever grow them, then we don't have people to grow others. But the worst thing would be if then we grow them and then we lose them. So we have to have ways to retain them in the long term. Now, that usually involves a little bit of motivation as well, which is why I'm such a big fan of incentives at that point, because part of retention has to be more opportunity to earn more if they can do more. Some people want to go into management, some people don't. But in any case, we want to make sure that part of our retention strategy is continued growth, but then also continued earning opportunity. So as we think about leadership quadrants, I think it's really important to kind of think in your own company what this looks like. And here's, I think, an important little diagram to come up with in your company and think about who fits into what category. I think this is a really important thing. When we think about healthy companies, I think balance comes from having like culture builders and leadership in all 4 of these quadrants. And so if you want to really analyze your own company, I think you should think, hey, which one is missing in our company or which one needs a little work? And so I like to think of it in these 4 quadrants. And I say, if I've got builders and I've got optimizers, who are those builders? Like builders are the growth drivers in the business. They're there to drive the growth forward. These are people like sales and designers and estimators, account managers that are out cross-selling and upselling, salespeople that might be inside sales, outside sales. And then on the optimizers, these are people that once we go out and sell that business, they're optimizing the outcomes, right? They're protecting our profit. And so these are people like the finance people who are helping us set up pricing and making sure our packages are profitable and handling job costing, all these sorts of things. But then we've obviously got ops managers, project managers, production managers. There's lots of titles. Could be a general manager. You've got many different titles in the industry, as we all know. But these people are optimizing efficiency. They're making sure the operation as few flow restrictions as possible. They're always running that 5S program. They're thinking lean all the time. They're really highly concerned about estimated versus actual hours, gross profits, finding materials for the right price. It could be a logistics person or a materials buyer. Depending on the size of the company, there's lots of roles here. Now, then we get down here and we start to think about stabilizers. Now, stabilizers, they're kind of out there day to day doing the work, and they keep our culture stable and they keep our business stable. And so it's really important that culture and the systems are really baked into these stabilizer roles. And I kind of think of them as like the culture carriers. They're the people who day to day make it the way it is based on them, first off, knowing the systems, understanding why they're in place, more importantly, understanding the founder's vision for the business and what that mission really is that they're on. And this is why I always say, you got to talk about that mission and vision so much that you almost drive everybody crazy, because we want to make sure these culture carriers remember what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I think if the visionary is not constantly doing that, we're going to have a problem. And so these culture carriers, or these stabilizers, are crew managers. I think individual contributors themselves, everybody in the company, everybody who doesn't really manage anybody else is out there carrying the culture forward in the way that they're doing their training, they're doing the work, they're learning on their own, they're developing as people. All these things carry the culture. And that's why I think having a personal development program in your company is so important. That's why we actually do the free personal development program once a month for you and your staff. Is, your staff, their families, your family, you should be setting goals and you should be having a personal vision for your life, just like the business. And I think it's really important that we nurture those culture carriers so that they too really live their life the way you want to run your business, which is mission and purpose driven. And then when we kind of look over on the other last step, which is not last by any means, it's usually first, is really this visionary. Now, again, there's lots of visionary leaders out there in the world who kind of get misconstrued as dreamers. And I've certainly felt that way before, where you kind of know where you're going, but you're not telling everyone around you, and they just aren't clear on what it is that you're actually trying to do, or even why. And so it gets really annoying following a visionary who can't really explain it clearly to everybody, because everyone else just kind of misconstrues all of that drive that they have as greed, really, at the end of the day. If you can't explain why you're doing what you're doing and what impact you're going to have if you succeed, then oftentimes people just perceive everything being about the money. And why wouldn't they? Let's be honest. Most people don't have enough. So this scarcity mindset comes in. And even though that visionary may have more of an abundant mindset and not really be entirely money driven at that stage of life, the people that are looking at them are looking through a lens in which maybe they're still a little scarce on money. And so they start to believe their own story, which is everything this founder or this owner or this family business is doing is for themselves. And I think it's really important that you talk about this a lot, because I honestly believe, after getting to know thousands of founders, that very few actually do it just for the money. And I really think this is an important thing to touch on. As we think about that, really think, which quadrant are we weakest in? And where should we really be focusing on improving culture most? And if it's all four, that's okay. You're probably just lacking some systems. And that's what we're going to talk about here next. So when I think about systemization, as I really think about career pathing, when I really get into a step-by-step, I think what has to happen is we have to get really clear on what the career ladders look like in the business. Now, I've given you some examples here, and obviously everybody's got different terminology in their businesses, but a key thing that I really would think of is we're going to kind of categorize using the four pillars. We're going to say we've got operations pathways, we've got a customer pathway, we've definitely always got a finance pathway, and of course, we're going to always need a people pathway. Now, you may create a few more. I really like to keep this stuff simple. I don't like to have too many pathways, but when somebody comes into the business, let's say an apprentice, I want them to be able to very quickly see that there is a much bigger future that they could grow into, and that this company's going to keep growing. And that's why I want to be able to tell them about my vision. In 10 years, we're going to be at $10 million, for example. If today we're at 2 million and we don't have a lot of management positions and they come in, they may not see that they could keep growing with this company long term. Whereas if I explain, like, hey, 10 years from now, this is where we're going to be, and we're going to have 3 branches, and you could be running your own, or hey, we're going to even be giving up employee ownership over the next few years, that changes everything. People see that there's some room for them to grow. And then their mission or their personal vision for their life seems possible within your company. Your company's vision is big enough to allow them to keep growing and get where they want to go. And that's why I think it's so important to help your team create personal vision and mission so that they can believe in your company mission, but more importantly, kind of attach themselves to it and say, hey, if this company goes where it's going, I'm going to have a lot of opportunity to go with that company. And it's going to get me exactly where I want to be in life. And I like these people. I like what they do. I like this type of work. And if it's going to give back everything I need to fuel my life's vision, then I'm in the right place. So when you think about an apprentice, they're going to next step on the ladder is to become a full-fledged tradesperson. Now, this is my career right here on to a T. I was an apprentice, then I was a tradesperson, then I was a crew leader, then I was a department manager, then I joined the leadership team, and I started my own company. And this is really not that uncommon, right? This pathway is very clear. But in your own company, if you can't show people that this is how it happens, then I think you often lose people down here, and particularly if you're calling them laborers. Laborers don't see a path forward. They think that their job is to labor for life because there is no pathway. And so I think it's really important to get this documented. And then when you see the list behind me here, I've got operations pathway, customer pathway, finance pathway, people. Each time it's an entry-level job, whether it's in an admin role that steps up to accounting, that eventually steps up to controller or VP of finance. And at any step, maybe down here, I've got a tradesperson that wants to jump into finance. I'd be completely okay with that. If they want to go do night school and become the controller and they started out as an apprentice, there'd be nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think the CFO of Yellowstone, an $800 million company, one of the most successful companies in the entire industry, is led by a CFO who started as a summer student laborer. And so when you think about that transition, it's pretty unbelievable. But in our industry, there's so many roles, so much opportunity for growth. The sky's the limit. But I don't think landscape companies do a good enough job at sharing that. And this is why we've got 40% turnover. And this is why we're not attracting the best people into the industry. This is why we've got, 7, 8, 10% of our workforce as women when we should be balanced, we're not attracting all these great people into our industry because they don't see all these career paths in landscaping. People just think of it as pulling weeds, digging ditches, and mowing lawns. And it's up to us to change that. Once you've got this all documented, get it on the wall. Put it on the wall in the office. Put it in your job descriptions. Put it on your web pages. Put it on your hiring pages. Put it on your job ads. Make sure that people see the career paths, and then build out Greenius to support them so that all of these paths, every one of these steps has a career path and they know where they're going to get next. Now, people don't move through this pathway fast. This is an entire career. This isn't something that we should be moving people through over 3 years. This is a career. This is where you go over 15 years. It takes 15 years to go from the bottom rung to the top. It doesn't take 5. And what I see happening all the time in companies who do start career pathing is they're pushing people up that ladder way too fast without any training, without any support, without any guidance, without any SOPs. And so what we do is we take our best tradesperson, we stick them right up to the leadership team without any management training, no systems, no processes. We more or less fire all of our problems at them. They get burned out, they quit, and then we say they weren't the right person. I'll tell you who isn't the right person if that's happening in your company. It's you. You're not the right person to build leaders. And I always say, like, I ask myself this question every day. When I see a problem, I always ask myself why, and I usually come back to myself, and then I say, what has to be true in order for that problem to go away? And number 2 is, who is the person I need to become in order for that to stop happening to me? And as a leader, you have to be able to ask yourself those 2 questions. What has to be true for this problem to go away? I have to create some systems. Who do I need to become in order for this to go away? Well, first off, I got to let my ego step to the side and admit that the problem is a result of the lack of leadership that I possess right now. But if I ask somebody who's been where I've been, where I'm going, and if I can do some reading and put things into action, join a group like this, and then actually do the stuff that we talk about instead of just showing up and watching for entertainment. If you do this stuff, then you become the leader you need to be, and you create the systems that eliminate these problems systematically. Otherwise, you're just going to stand around and say, there's nobody good anymore. And that's bullshit, and we all know it. There's plenty of good people. It's up to you to create a company that's so good that they decide to come and join you, and then they stick around for the long haul. I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes to do this exercise. I'm going to take a little break, give you guys 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back, talk about this one a little bit. There's a few key SOPs here on the board that I'm going to talk about, why you need them, how to use them. And of course, as always, we're going to give you a template of these SOPs. We're going to drop those in the chat for you, and you can go ahead and update those and deploy those in your company this week. But this exercise, I want you to map your best 5 people. What I want you to do is just follow along with this little chart, and I want you to start with your best 5 to work this muscle. But consider, what would it cost if one of these best 5 decide to split because they don't see the pathway in front of them? Now, you can't just say, hey, you're going to keep growing here and expect them to believe it. The scariest thing for a human is not knowing what's coming next. We all know that. That is scary as hell. Imagine going to work and counting on a founder who says, don't worry, stick with me and everything will be fine. That would be very scary. But a leader who just helps draw out that future, show the future, talk about what has to happen, invest in training, maybe even like night school or executive programs at college, whatever it happens to be, to get them to that next stage. Could be obviously trade training, could be product training, could be just about anything. But let's go ahead and work on this. So we got the employee, their current role, the next role, the training that they're going to need, and the timeline. So take your best 5 and we'll go from there. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you got a few minutes in on that. As you think about this, I think it's really important to keep going down the list. So the big takeaway for this week, I want you to work through all of the roles in your business, the starting roles, and plug them into one of those pathways that we talked about earlier when we broke it down into the 4 pillars. Try to make sure that every entry-level role fits into one of those 4. And so you might have multiple. So just kind of going back to that, there might be multiple types of apprentices or multiple types of administrators. There could be office admin people, or could be office that leads to an office manager. And so create a few within each. And what you'll notice is like you'll end up with a few pathways within operations, a few pathways within the customer, finance, and people. And those pathways really allow you to create flexibility, and people can jump from one pathway to the next anytime. Maybe they're an apprentice and they end up as a trade, but then they pop down into the account manager role and then they pick up there. So, at this point, maybe somebody takes a detour in their career after being a trade and they are a great fit as an account manager and they end up hopping on that path. And that's completely normal. So I think the more you share all of your pathways, the more people start to see that there's room to move around. And there's no reason that an account manager couldn't one day end up being the controller in the company. Sure, they're going to have to go back to school. They're going to have to be doing some night school or online college, maybe even taking some time off seasonally to do some 8-week intensive programs. But why wouldn't we want to create that pathway rather than lose someone who has all of that background, understanding the business, understanding our customers, then running finance? There's so many opportunities for us to take advantage of this career path as business leaders. There's just no reason not to make sure that people understand it. I'll take a few questions and comments right now.
We've got a question here. One moment. Hector would like to know if we have SOPs in Lana in Spanish.
Yes, Lana will create the SOPs in any language. So absolutely. Hector, just go ahead and ask her, and if you can, be as specific as possible, exactly what dialect of Spanish you'd also like her to help you with.
And Sean just added into the chat there that if you actually ask for the SOP in your language, in the dialect of Spanish, you're looking for the SOP and it'll respond in that same language. And now you can talk to Lana as well. Just an FYI for those who didn't know.
The SOPs that we're releasing this week, what we really want to do is make sure that you build out these SOPs for yourself. So how to recruit A players kind of goes without saying why you need it, but building one in your company makes a huge difference, because whether you're going to work internally to do all of your hiring, or you're going to work with a recruiting firm or a people company that help you build your people, you're going to need an SOP. We have to be clear on who we're recruiting, how we're recruiting, where we're going to get those people. We're going to need really good job descriptions. We're going to have to make sure that our web pages are up to date. There's lots of things to take into consideration to create a really good recruiting program. And when you think about it, your recruiting program is really the tip of the spear in the company. If you're thinking about, great companies, they're always made up of great customers and great people. We need great people to do the work. The quality of your company really depends on your ability to recruit great people. So it really is like the tip of the spear for building a great company. So this SOP, in my opinion, is one of the most important SOPs in the entire company. And if it's missing, and you're looking around saying, I don't know how come, but I don't have the best people, this is the reason why. And again, when we're beginning with the end in mind, saying we're going to build this incredible company with a great company culture, we've got to have the right people to do it with. Next, the onboarding. Again, I talked about it earlier, 30, 60, 90-day onboarding plans. We want to make sure that these are built, that they're all built out, And what I mean by that is not just a whiteboard, but we've got Greenius all set up. We've got our career paths in there. We've tagged supporting training. We're building our own training courses. Christian has done some great videos to help people understand how to take SOPs, build those into Synthesia to create video training to support these SOPs and to support all of these initiatives. And this onboarding program is key. And again, Lana can help you do that. And when you start to work with Lana a little bit and have better conversations with Lana, she's going to help you get really specific onboarding plans for each role in your company in a matter of minutes. The better conversations you have, the better she's going to be able to build. And then on an ongoing basis, update those based on everything she knows about your company. Because don't forget, you're building an AI database when you're working in Lana. And each time you build one of these SOPs, you're teaching your own AI database to know exactly how your business operates. So as we start launching the crew agents and the meeting agents and the assistants for every role that you're identifying here in these SOPs and in your training, what happens is their assistants that we're going to be deploying will know exactly what these people are responsible for. And the assistants will also be getting trained off of all of these SOPs and job descriptions you've built so that they know how to best assist your actual humans. And so when you think about these SOPs, I want you to think about them a little bit differently. These SOPs are going to be really key in not just training your people, but training your agents. And you got to remember, agents are assistants for people. And if you've got these SOPs and job descriptions and career paths figured out, the agents are going to be able to help like never before. And we really are building your AI central nervous system every time you're working there in Lana and saving these important documents in the Lean docs. Next up, training and weekly skill building and leadership development. Again, what is that SOP in your company? How do we know how we're going to take apprentices and turn them into leaders if we haven't documented it? Performance reviews, how often, how do we run them? What do we ask? What do we do? What do they do? All these important steps need to be clear if you expect to really build a great culture. People need that feedback. Now, the scoreboards are a key component of the performance reviews. And last week I got a little hot when I was talking about scorecards. I was saying, hey, if you're coming here every week and you're not using scorecards yet, you're wasting your time. And I really mean that because scorecards are used for so many other things in the business. And here's a perfect example. We can't possibly do good performance reviews that are actually based on rational metrics and rational behavior. Instead, it just becomes emotional. We sit down and have a performance review with no metrics. It's really just our opinion versus theirs. And that's not a fun way to be managed as an employee. And it really doesn't feel good as a leader. And if you're like me, and I think like most people, when you don't have metrics to guide the conversation, you kind of turn to being too nice. You're just like, hey, you've been doing a great job. Keep up the good work. Why don't you work on this or that? But there's not a lot of meaning to it. If you give them too hard of feedback, they usually quit because they feel like they don't know where to start. Whereas if there's a scorecard with bad metrics, that should be an opportunity as a leader to just show them where the metrics aren't looking so good. And then also just to receive those metrics as just being a sign. And that sign is where we're going to apply more effort, more training in the future to get a better result. Now, obviously, we can't keep having bad results in the same area, performance review after performance review. So it also tells us when it's time to actually pull the ripcord and let people go. Now, career pathing in general is a key component to all of this. And if you don't know how to document growth paths, ladders, and readiness the way that I was showing you earlier, hopefully I've given you a little bit of a framework, but your SOP is the documented way of doing it. And this is important because, yes, the founder needs to know and the leadership team needs to know, but everybody in the company needs to know that these exist. And trust me, when these SOPs get built and deployed And when you've handed these off to everyone in your company, along with an opportunity to create their career path and fill in the blanks, it's as simple as that ladder I showed you earlier. People get fired up because they see the pathway forward. And trust me, people don't stay for paychecks. They can get a paycheck here, there, or anywhere, and maybe even one for a couple bucks an hour up the street. But the reality is they stay for the growth opportunity when they see it, because it's far easier to see the growth opportunity in the company you work with if it's well documented, tracked, and followed, particularly with scorecards, than it is in a company that you don't work at, or a company where you might think of moving on for a couple bucks an hour. But if their career paths aren't as clear as yours, trust me, your staff are going to be staying with you, telling everyone they know, and really bringing all of that talent into your company. It really does become a growth magnet. I think all of the best people in this industry, and even in the construction industry, are looking for companies that look, act, and feel the way we've described today. And it's up to you to make yours that way.
Mark, I've grabbed a couple here for you that I'd love for you to answer. The first one is leadership team is bilingual. Therefore, Spanish only estimators is not a limitation within our company. We are hiring remote workers from Mexico to help with estimating. What kind of pathways can we create for these workers?
Really, I think exactly the same. For many years, we were developing software with people in the Ukraine and other parts of the world. And, quite often they were career pathing on through from, an entry level position all the way up to project managers as software engineers. And so I think, having remote workforce is no different. We create career paths. Where are they today? Maybe they're doing some estimating, but maybe they want to move into design. Maybe they want to even start doing sales. These days we can do a lot of sales and estimating fully remote. They could lead project scheduling. They could lead logistics. They could lead material sourcing. All kinds of management positions can be fully remote this day and age.
Thanks for that, Mark. We'll take one more. Sarah asked, what is an ideal timeline to travel the ladder? You started from the bottom to top 15 years. What are your thoughts, Mark?
Ultimately, I think to go from an apprentice through to a tradesperson, depending on the trade, obviously, there's different trades that require different timelines. You're 3 to 5 years to be a full tradesperson. And sometimes in landscape, people end up with multiple trades. They might be a carpenter, they might be a stonemason, they might be a horticulturalist. Sometimes they go and get a heavy truck driver's license or a heavy equipment license. And so there's all kinds of opportunity there. So I think in a perfect world, I would want my tradespeople to be 5 years or so getting to the tradesperson expertise level. That's going to give them that 10,000 hour rule. And I'm a big believer in that. It takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at anything. And that's with a lot of focus. And now, if they've got that expertise in the field, then I'd be very comfortable putting them into a crew manager position, which again, to really get really good at being a crew manager or foreman, whatever title you're using in your company, I'd highly recommend using crew manager or crew leader to get away from the gender bias. But what I would really strongly suggest is you really look at 3 to 5 years in that crew manager or crew leader role before considering moving them into ops manager or project manager or production manager type role. And so if they're going to stay on that operational pathway, as you start to add that up, you're basically another 3 to 5 years in that type of a leadership role that I just described in one of those 3 manager buckets before I would consider putting them up one more level, which would be a VP level, which would generally be managing people who are doing what they were doing in those operations type management roles. Hopefully that's a good example, but I feel like 3 to 5 years at each stage is generally what would be needed to actually master each stage. These are very complex jobs. We all know this. I can say for sure, after 25 years of working in landscape, I learn something every single day I show up. So I think 3 to 5 years at each rung is really reasonable.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Mastermind virtual experience is coming. We are hoping to launch this a little later this quarter. I can say this quarter now because it's October 1st. So our intention is to launch the virtual version of our mastermind groups in November. We want to ensure that we get as many of you guys participating as possible. We've heard you asking your guides. We know you want to be a part of it based on the experience that we had when we were in person in Dallas. So you can go ahead and you can scan that QR code in order to apply to be a part of the groups. You do need to apply to be a part of the cohort. This is included in your Accelerator subscription, so please join us. Your team members are welcome to join as well. They will specify which pillar of interest they want to get started with so we can make sure we get them in the right group with the right people. So scan that QR code, complete the application prior to October 15th so we can make sure that we get all of the groups put together in time to launch in November.
For those of you who aren't sure if you want to put your workers or team members in masterminds, I'll say this. Every role in your company that's in management right now, they get to work with their peers. That's why we're doing this. So imagine if you've got a finance person who's now in a peer group with 6 to 8 other finance people. They are building a network of people who do the same job as them, that now they get to share these SOPs back and forth, best practices, ask for advice, seek mentorship from others in the industry. And when you've got a problem in your business, now you've got 8 finance people kind of answering best practices to your finance person. Same holds true for operations, for salespeople. There's a lot of playbooks that can be shared back and forth, lots of advice, lots of best practices. So I'd highly recommend that you sign somebody up for all 4 pillars from your company to represent your company, because just think, if you've got 4 people signed up for these masterminds and they're in groups with 8 people, you kind of now have 32 management people helping solve problems in your company. That's why we're doing this. We're not charging any money for this. This is just simply building a network for your team to level up and draw from the experience of others as you go through this 1-year accelerator program. And hopefully you stay on the program year in and year out. But what we really want to make sure is that everyone on your team has access to others to truly level up and build a network that they can rely on long term. That's what this program's all about. I'm not a big believer that we need to go offer peer groups, because those exist, and I think there's some great peer groups out in the world already. These groups are a little different than peer groups. It's really a mastermind opportunity, fully remote, with a few opportunities at the events, to just build a collective group that you can rely on for advice day to day.
October is here. We have our October Sprint series ready to go. You should all have meetings on your calendar, because guess what? We're kicking off on Monday, the 6th. This time around, the kickoff will be a 2-hour session. So just wanted to make that call out, but don't worry, we've jam-packed those 2 hours, and we're gonna have some LeanScaper AI time as well. So Christian dropped a note in all of our accelerator groups within the LeanScaper community. You can find all of the information there. Christian's He's sharing the document that he shared with all of you guys today in those groups. So get in there, take a look at it, get ready for what we're going to be talking about, because October is definitely being set up for some really great success. Lots more to come. We'll see you guys on Monday.